Thank you so very much, Mr. Moderator, and I am trusting that I will live up to this billing. I would like to confirm that everybody can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. Please I apologize for the lighting here. I've been moving around quite a bit. As has already been explained, I'm away to Kigali. I'm in Kigali, Rwanda. And it was interesting hearing the prof speak about Rwanda. But let me start by acknowledging and congratulating the president of our dear ICSAN and the council members of ICSAN for this great occasion, for this wonderful way of giving back to society by developing the body of public knowledge and awareness on such an important topic as our external reserve dynamics and governance challenges. I also want to honor the presence of the Honorable Minister ably represented and all dignitaries here and council members as well of ICSAN. Thank you for the opportunity to be a discussant on this very important topic. And I'm going to start by really thanking and congratulating Professor Adi on such an enlightening presentation. And may I also say a very passionate presentation about what Nigeria ought to do at a time like this. And I'm going to essentially follow in his steps by not even attempting to apportion blame, but just really share what I think we can do better. Let me start by saying that the clear explanation of the drivers of external reserves given to us by Prof are apt and very well received. So I commend you on talking about these clear drivers. So these drivers include capital flows, trade, diaspora remittances, and the impact of policy. And may I say, not just domestic policy, which is within our control, but policies of other governments, nationals, other governments across the world that also have an impact. One of the policies, for example, international policies that affect capital flows is the recent decision, for example, by the United States government to inch up interest rates. Obviously, that makes investments in the US more attractive to international investors, and investments in emerging markets like ours automatically become less attractive. Remember that these are investments that are already classified as higher risk investments. I also totally align with Professor's emphasis on the need to focus on our ability to produce and export goods and services, and also on the very importance of the input of the factors of production, and such as qualified manpower, which unfortunately we're losing every day. And all employers of labor in this room, I am sure, will attest to that, because today it is not just companies that are competing for personnel, it is countries that are competing and economies that are competing for the best personnel across the world. And mobility of personnel has become much easier than in the past. I also appreciate his emphasis on the need to focus on our ability to produce and export goods and services. And of course, on the importance of prudential economic management and fiscal buffers, which we have probably excelled better at in previous administrations, as he has also shared with us. Now, we cannot overemphasize the need to create an export-oriented economy. And for me, I think this is time to look well beyond oil. Now, our speaker mentioned Rwanda. I'm presently in Rwanda, and clearly one of the things that you realize is that the process of reactivating or regenerating or reviving an economy is not necessarily rocket science. It just takes determination, commitment, and indeed the combination of looking inwards and also looking outwards, some of which this government seems to be getting very correctly. I think my only minor point of departure with Prof will be with his reference to foreign portfolio investments. And it's not really a point of departure. Maybe I would call it a point of maybe a little bit of elaboration. So I totally agree with the definitions of FDI and FPI, and recognize that indeed foreign direct investment is the best for our economy, because we're talking about attracting long-term, sticky, patient, and non-volatile flows of capital that come typically by way of opening international companies opening branches in Nigeria, equity investments in Nigerian startups, equity investments in Nigerian businesses, significant equity investments as opposed to portfolio investments. So yes, this is desirable and this is great. But foreign portfolio investment is, of course, shorter tenured investment in either equity or debt, typically not necessarily substantial enough to gain control of those businesses, but as it says, a portfolio investment. And it also includes investments in both government securities and corporate securities. Now, I have personally, in my book, Riding the Eagle, A Guide to Investing in Nigeria, I likened foreign investment or foreign capital flows to blood in the body of a human being. And so I would say that FDI represents your ability to generate your own blood over time. But FPI represents infusion of blood, which you may get from time to time as required. Now, both are important, both are life-saving, both are life-giving. But obviously, if you are relying consistently on just injection of blood and you are not able to, as it were, build your own blood over time, then you will have a health crisis. So now I would like to go into my own comments and my own contributions specifically. Nations grow their foreign reserves, obviously, when their foreign exchange disbursements are kept lower than their foreign exchange receipts. The surplus gives rise to foreign reserves. Obviously, the reverse is also true. So when your disbursements and your foreign exchange disbursements are higher than your foreign exchange earnings, then you have what is called a deficit. And obviously, a sustained deficit will erode whatever reserves you have gained over time. So the sustained ability to achieve and maintain such surpluses is what leads to healthy and buoyant reserves, which is the desired stage or state for any strong economy. I have some statistics here which I can share, and they essentially show, and I will share, after this. I'm not displaying the slides, but I will share this with the organizers after. It shows Nigeria's historical gross reserves over the past 12 years. So in 2010, our reserves stood at $32.35 billion. And within this period, peaked in 2012 at $44.18 billion. And as at 2021 was $40.52 billion. And in the course of this year, of course, have dropped significantly again since then. Now, if we were to compare these reserves with what obtains in other African countries, you will see that despite the fact that Nigeria is recognized as the largest economy in Africa, our foreign reserves at 38.54, and of course have dropped below that now, are way lower than South Africa, which has $59.25 billion. Closest would be Egypt at $35 billion. And so our leadership, in terms of size of our GDP, of course, is not reflected in the size of our reserves. And the continued inevitability, so to speak, of the central bank defending the Naira due to some of the factors that we have already discussed here, which is our excessive propensity to import, including importation of finished petroleum, for domestic consumption, has led to a situation in which our reserves are not at the stage or the state or level that we would desire. Now, Currently, Nigeria's foreign exchange reserve is derived mainly from the proceeds of crude oil production and sales. Our external reserves have prior to now reached, as high as $64 billion in 2008, when oil price reached its all-time high level of $147 per barrel. Now, we are at a stage where even when the oil price increases, as it has been doing in recent times due to partly the Russia-Ukraine war, we're no longer able to capitalize this because the volume of petroleum that we are finished goods that we are importing, whose prices are also rising, essentially erodes whatever benefits we could have got. So what are the causes of our gross reserves decline? Continuous forex intervention by the central bank to stabilize the naira, CBN's efforts to meet dollar demands in the country and reduce pressure on the naira has forced it to make continuous withdrawals. So like Professor has said, I agree that we are all responsible for this. Decline in oil revenue due to suboptimal oil production, because unfortunately, even though Nigeria was able to get an increase in its OPEC production quota, almost 1.8 million barrels per day in July, up from 1.772 million barrels per day in June, we are not able to take advantage of this because production, unfortunately, continues to drop and has dropped to as low as 1.26 million barrels per day due to lingering oil theft and other challenges which continue to impede the country's ability to take advantage. So clearly, we have reached a stage where we must look beyond oil earnings. And I totally align myself with the contributions of the Prof as to how we need to stimulate domestic production. Now, obviously also high cost of importation of refined petroleum products, rising fuel subsidy costs, which seems to be like a runaway train right now. The seeming lack of political will to actually get our local refineries working, and now uncertainties about the actual takeoff of the Dangote refinery, which is supposed to be the game changer in this space. There has been a sharp spike in our trade deficit. Our trade deficit increased by 175% in the second quarter of 2022. So how can Nigeria increase and appropriately utilize its foreign reserves? Countries, examining other countries across the world, you will see that these countries have utilized a combination of methods, such as maintaining a dedicated liquidity portfolio, such as having long-term or investment portfolios through their sovereign wealth fund, which we have also initiated. We need to actually utilize these vehicles to grow wealth over time, immunizing their portfolios, which is intended to neutralize foreign exchange and interest rate risks. And of course, the petroleum fund buffer portfolio, similar to the sovereign wealth. Now, it is appropriate that Nigeria follows the path of these countries. But honestly speaking, I do need to emphasize again that this is more than the best time. If ever, obviously the best time to diversify our revenue sources was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. The next best time is now. And so how can we reorganize and restructure? And again, I align with Prof, who has talked about the need to restructure our economy and the challenges with it. How can we restructure our economy so that we can take advantage of opportunities in the agricultural space, for example, in the solid mineral space, for example? How can we retool and equip our teeming masses to become productive? Now, one of the only good developments, the major positive developments in terms of FDI flows, obviously, and which again, Prof has mentioned, has been the significant flows of funds in the venture capital space. Now, this is something that has reflected the creativity of our youth. And indeed, our greatest strength remain the potential of our people. So we clearly need to make investments in social, I would say social investments that will stimulate labor productivity, that will improve the qualification and the preparation and the ability of our populace and our labor force to generate desired income and revenues for Nigeria. Obviously, also we need to address the security and other challenges, infrastructure and security challenges that are leading to a massive exodus, unfortunately, of our youth, who are the ones who have the capacity actually to turn things around for us in terms of productivity. So if we grow and empower our labor force, the private sector, provide increased employment opportunities, enhance the quality of life, enhance socio-political, cultural, and economic activities so that we can stem not just the tide of rural-urban migration, but also stem the tide of international migration of our labor force. Then perhaps we can reverse some of the adverse trends that we have spoken about. Prof mentioned, he said something that I need to report. He said, if you have children here, they're probably abroad. I mean, I think I can say that by the grace of God, by virtue of being an entrepreneur and creating employment, not only have my 3 children returned from abroad, they are gainfully employed within the business of Emerging Africa Capital. And I challenge every one of our friends and colleagues to be able to do the same. Create opportunities for Nigerians. Thank you. Create opportunities for Nigerians both at home and abroad. So in closing now, so as not to exhaust my time, I do believe that there are very strong challenges ahead of the next administration. These challenges are not challenges that will be met by short-term measures, but will be met by strong political will to create an enabling environment for increased productivity across all relevant sectors, to engage the youth and the children who are economically excluded right now significantly and who form the bedrock of labor that could be available to turn situations around for Nigeria, embrace governance practices that favor inclusiveness, that will support productivity of our youth and our people, will stem some of the adverse migration that we have seen, and very importantly, diversify our revenue sources and our sources of foreign exchange income way beyond oil. So I say, let's look beyond oil. Personally, I think the oil game is done and dusted. It's as good as over. Thank you very much for your time and attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much.